I did at SIPI a few years back, and then in the second part of the presentation, I want to add a little bit more of some reflection I've thought about more so in today's political climate. So first, I want to begin by saying that I really resonate with the idea of kinship in academia that Heather and Robin presented. And so I'd like to thank my older brother and older sister in terms of academia, Tiffany and Lloyd Lee for really pulling this together, and our elder, Dr. C, for all your leadership, and of course my sisters Wendy and Robin and Catherine and Delia. We really are a strong family, and it's not just here in UNM, but it extends all the way to ASU and SIPI, and I see Terry here. You still at SIPI? Yeah, I remember about 5 years ago I had just started at SIPI, and I came to this event and I had to get it approved all the way up to Washington to be able to be here. And that's kind of what I want to present about today. Wendy talked about bureaucracy and just how thick it is especially when working for the federal government. And I want to share the story of at SIPI, our students, our faculty, we're embedded in that bureaucracy, but really, it's we're still culturally sovereign when it comes down to it. So anyways, so does anyone recognize this gas station? Where is this at? Yeah, okay, Zia. I think this is a really cute picture. The story I'm going to read isn't about this gas station, but it's a good visual for the story. Actually, does anyone want to come read this for me? It's a little fun. Diane? Okay, Daphne. Okay. But as I set it up, so Michelle said in one of her first slides, she wanted to challenge this idea of nation building, and she said, it was kind of born out of 90s thinking. It was really economically driven, but now, the conversation has really fleshed out to be community-oriented and very holistic in its approach. So that's what this story is born out of. Usually I share the story at the end of my presentation, but I thought I'd bring it to the forefront this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Selena listened intently at a celebratory event while the political leader of her Native nation spoke enthusiastically over the opening of their newest economic enterprise, a gas station. On this occasion, she was attending the event as a student grounded in several Native studies courses at a federally operated tribal college. She was at the center of a largely faculty-driven movement within the institution that was working toward establishing a Native nation building foundation in general education to eventually be incorporated as a value in practice across all facets of the college. Within her academic program of studies, she took as many Native studies-oriented courses as possible. Although a degree in Native American studies was not offered, she and her advisor believed in basing her career goals within an NAS framework. Thus, she was a student who exemplified the vision of this movement in terms of what qualities and Indigenous-centered perspectives a graduate of a Native Nations tribal community college would embody.
As the tribal political leader gained momentum in his speech, he proclaimed the gas station to be an act of nation building. Having observed carefully, Selena understood this proclamation as one being made within the limited context of profit-making. She thought quietly but profoundly to herself, that is not nation building. She considered the readings she had completed, the speakers she had heard, and most significantly, the projects she had engaged in. What came to her mind were ideas of nation building that encompassed finding common ground, unity, education, core values, community, self-determination, a prosperous environment, and community projects as one. So in her eyes, this is another student's quote, it's another idea of nation building as a collection of everything, but really boiling down to unity. Today's conversations talked a lot about, sometimes we're a little disjointed, sometimes we're a little too focused on this, we're too focused on that. But, in the essence of what a lot of the students came away with over the course of a few semesters of studying nation building and Native studies is it's everything. But bottom line, it's about unity and addressing problems. Sometimes we're given this misconception, or there's this misconception that Native studies were about complaining, we're about this, we're about dwelling on the past, but in reality, it's really about creating solutions. And that's where she was coming from. Another student, she shared a story about one of her students, one of her buddies, and her student was saying, and her buddy was saying, the upcoming student senate elections were occurring at SIPI, and if you've been to SIPI, like I mentioned before, it's super ingrained in that, in that mindset of hierarchy and bureaucracy. But anyways, she said, her friend said, well, I'm not going to vote in student senate because student senate doesn't practice nation building. And so I thought, that was really cute that, she was taking it that far to heart, but at the same time, like Governor Teller and other people were saying, you got to participate at the same time if you want it to be different. So those are two little stories I wanted to share with you to kind of set the tone for where we're going. So I'm just going to go over the first research question that guided this phenomenological study before I get out. So how do Indigenous students plan their academic, career, and cultural goals in relationship to nation building and practice? And so I looked at, decolonization, Indigenous education, and also even, I didn't look at it specifically in this study, but it was part of the conversation, is the racial framework. So raise your hand if you've been to SIPI at any time in your life. Okay, good. So you know these pictures, you recognize them. The top picture is probably, kind of what it looks like most of the time. I had some students say, they applied to SIPI and they never set foot on there, but what they were envisioning is maybe like the bottom two slides, the bottom two pictures. So greenery and, that state-of-the-art idea, but in reality, once the federal government established the school in the 1970s, they haven't really invested in it since then. So I think that's indicative of, the resilience and the perseverance of the life that runs through the school, but at the same time, at the racism that's ingrained in the federal bureaucracy and the failure to honor the treaties that the school is meant to uphold. So there was a nation-building grant by the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, and I was a part of the grant, and I just wanted to capture the things that developed from that grant, and also, everything that's been developed at SIPI before I came, while I was there, and especially now, what's still going on, what's still in play. So, right now, even at UNM, across the nation, across the state, we're engaged in this focus on general education and what it really means to be a an educated person, in the state, in our schools. And at SIPI, they're a tribal college, but at the same time, they're bound by these restrictions of the federal government. One of the strengths, but the challenges, is there's so many diverse nations represented at the school, so it's hard to really come up with like a Pueblo core values curriculum or a Diné curriculum like you might have at a tribal college where only one tribal nation is its focus. So what they've been developing is a cultural legacy idea, and then my proposition was, why don't you push it into a nation building and community engagement agenda? Because nation building, it's very, it's native oriented, and this idea of community engagement, it could also be looked at civic engagement, which is also big in the conversation of general education. So I articulated it in this way on the proposed articulation side, and then I tried to argue for it through the value statements that existed on the SIPI value side of things. And I won't read it, but I'll give you a moment to read those while you take a drink of water. So I was told it's just allergies, so it's okay if you want to talk to me later. Especially poor Rachel, I've been sitting by her. I keep meaning to tell her I'm not sick, don't worry. So, since then, the value statements have changed, they've been re-articulated, but that idea of self-determination is still very much in there. So I need you guys to help me for this next part. I need you to read this statement with me together, please, and you can state your name when it says Leola Tsinnajinnie. So if you guys can help me. So, I and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. How many of you could get through that and sign off on that? Well, I had to because I needed to feed myself. I needed a job. But of course, I took a moment's pause to think about, okay, how do I convince myself to sign this, aside from the fact that I want to teach these Native students. I want to live my dream. I want to be able to pay my bills. So what I thought about was what Robin said, we carry our family history. And so I have a picture up here of myself in front of the school where my dad teaches at, where my mom taught at. The school that my grandma helped develop, that's her at the top. She went to Albuquerque Indian School, so that's her at the bottom. And I thought, I'm not swearing this oath to the United States federal government. I'm swearing an oath to the federal government's treaty obligation and to my ancestors. That's what I'm swearing it to. I know it says in that oath not to do that, but that's what I did. So I mentioned my grandma, she went to Albuquerque Indian School. She's passed on now. Her legacy, of course, lives on. But her sister, my Nolly, has taken me under her wing, and that's her in this other picture with my son about almost 2 years ago now. And, she said, my grandma, Leola, their dad said, you're going to focus on school. And for me, for Grandma Mary, she's going to focus on traditional knowledge. That's the way they balanced out their family. And that's what I thought, that's what I think is, like Dr. Minthorn was saying, we bring our Indigenous values into the academy. And so, that's more about what I was saying of, I'm not swearing to the United States government, not that I hold anything against anyone who would, but in Native studies, sometimes that's hard to do. So anyways, It's this idea of native resurgence that I think that really lives on at places like SIPI or even UNM, where we're so thick in bureaucracy almost anywhere we go. Even in our deepest, in the deepest facets of our homes, like Governor Teller was saying. And I like how she said, we can cut the guys some slack, but we shouldn't cut them too much slack. So I'm gonna remember that. So just touching upon the foundations behind this project and the ideas behind this project, definitely I offered the students the highlights that came out of the Harvard project on economic development. I boiled down, this general idea of nation building is its self-determination in practice. And with the grant, I was able to offer a summer course specific to nation building and practice. And I had scholars like Dr. Tiffany Lee, Dr. Minthorn come in and talk about their expertise in Native studies. And what really hit home for the students, in addition to getting to meet these scholars, is to meet alumni from SIPI. So Mario Atencio, Stacy Abeni, Daphne Little Bear, she's my Tamaya sister, she came up and helped me just now. Raise your hand again. And one of the things they said really resonated with them was that these students, they came out of SIPI, they started at SIPI, and then they all went to UNM, that's how I knew them, and that's why I invited them in. But they said, the students were just so grounded in where they came from and where they wanted to go, and they honored SIPI as a home. And so I just highlighted some of the major takeaways the students had from those students. So for Daphne, she tells her story very honestly. She just did in my class a couple weeks ago, and that's powerful. Our stories are definitely powerful. And then Brayboy offers another holistic quote on nation building. So I mentioned Dr. Kaheti's always been an elder in the academy to me, not just as the person who led me to LLSS here on campus, but in the realm of literature that's out there. And he has this great metaphor that he describes the heart, base, and foundation. So it's this holistic approach to education about finding out, really pushing forward who you are and your passion, your vocation, what it is you want to be. And that's, that inspiration behind my research question is, how do we take all this knowledge and then what do we do with it to inform our decisions that we're making for ourselves into the future? And then, of course, decolonization. We read from Angela Wilson, Wazoo Towan, and Michael Yellowbird, and then I had the students reframe it into their own language so they understood it for themselves. But essentially, we look at it as indigenous intelligent resistance. Who was it who was talking about the student saying, I might as well walk around naked? Which scholar was that? Who remembers? But you guys remember that, right? Yeah, Wendy, okay. Yeah, so at some point, we got to negotiate what we really mean by decolonization. And I think as long as we're resisting and we're doing it intelligently, I think we can go ahead and call it decolonization. So here's an image of colonization. So we've got the flag, the settler flag, the TV, the Bible, money. Those are influences of colonization. And that's kind of building that consideration behind if we're to decolonize and practice indigenous education, we also have to understand the process of colonization itself and racism and how racism has been used against us. So I'm going to come back to that later on if I still have time and energy and voice. So just to take a quick survey of the room, we've discussed a lot of things today, but if you were to define nation building, just throw out a phrase or a word, what would nation building mean to you? So, anyone?
Love.
What's that?
Love.
Love. Okay, good. Yes, I love love. I love love. What else?
Community.
Love, community,
Voices.
voices, good.
Empowerment.
Empowerment,
Humility.
humility, yes. Interdependence, good. One more.
Consciousness.
Consciousness, okay. Very much so, and I think a lot of these ideas are embedded in the ideas that the students shared. So what I'm going to go over now are, I asked the students, how do you define nation building, and what is it that inspired that definition? So the first one was, the biggest one is common ground. Putting aside personal issues, working on a common goal, overcoming differences, and it really is about coming together. I know as Native people, we have a lot of common values, we have a lot of common characteristics and, ideas we believe in, but at the same time, we have a lot of differences. We have our grudges, our gossip and this and that, but, really it does come down to when we want to achieve a goal, we want to complete a project, we have this idea of common ground. So like this bottom quote says, I define nation building as building unity from diversity. So again, that's another reason why I thought, this conception of nation building would work really good in a place like SIPI or even in Native Studies programs. I think that's what unites us really well. So another response, another theme was nation building as education, and examples of that. Of course, we're taking classes, the pursuit of a PhD, and then they just referenced education through the readings, education through guest speakers, and just in essence, education is key. Nation building is core values. So some of the core values that were named here, I think, really speaks well to the core values that are listed up on the screen. I like this one, providing for my mom. That's, a core value of really being community and family driven versus being individualistic. Which I think we're taught to be a lot of times in the mainstream. And in this quote, core values gives you a visual. What I ask my students to do is, name their core values and then illustrate it. So that's what this picture is of the paw. It's an illustration of spirituality, of prayer, of Native languages. I have them, write down what they're referring to, but some of these students are really artistic, so I say, write it on a separate sheet of paper. You don't have to diagram it completely. And this is Mitchell Garcia from SIPI. And most of these, I use their real name to honor the knowledge they've given me. I gave them the option, use your real name or a pseudonym. So most of the time I use their real name, but in some cases, like in the first case, Selena's story, she was kind of thinking somehow about her tribe, so I didn't use her real name. But yeah, so this Mitchell is really Mitchell here. So nation building is our projects. So, all these projects that were shared today, I'm sure my students would say, yeah, that's nation building because it's projects. It's, it's doing something to create solutions. My cousin Yvette is here from Pine Hill, and she's all about nation building through projects. She's always, working to improve the playground. She's talking about, what she can do for elders, remodel the senior citizen center, create healthier options for lunch. And, that's what the students are referring to. It's completing these little projects, whether they be on the scale of what Michelle talked about or what Wendy talked about, or about, participating in the breast cancer walk. Selena, the one who opened with her gas station story, she said her family was fighting a lot. And her aunt was suffering from breast cancer, but they all decided to participate in the breast cancer walk together. And she said, to me, in my heart, that was nation building because it brought us together. So the students said, a lot of the times we can go around campus. I know I didn't have that much maturity as an undergraduate student in terms of like why things were being done. But once you put it all together, it does help you realize, all these little projects are for a reason. So during the summer, I told the students, we need to come up with, or you guys need to come up with a project. And I partnered with Dr. Danielle Lansing at SIPI to think about what can we do for the students, the young students, the earliest learners on campus. And so my students talked about it, and they said, we want to do a fashion show. And I kind of thought, well, that's cute, but, why do you really want to do it? And then they got all deep on me, and they said, well, stripping down to looking at our history at boarding schools and, how we were treated, how our identity was stripped away, to reintroduce that in a positive way, that's very powerful. They said it much better than that, but they convinced me, and I said, okay, come up with some outcomes, and these were the outcomes that they came up with. So, just thinking about the movements right now we have for like our boys with long hair, especially those who attend school in the city or anywhere, and just to experience life on a daily basis, and to say, I'm, like my nephew would say, I'm a man, I'm not a girl. That's big, and to instill that early on, I think really was mature of my students to think of. So here's a picture. They had a runway, and a lot of the students dressed up as models, and they got their young ones to get involved. See the kids as the audience. A lot of these students in my class on the left. So, these are pictures of the project they came up with. So, moving on into, defining nation building, they also said nation building is community. Of course, nation building is self-determination. In my paper I wrote, it's almost the first thing that comes to mind when we're in Native Studies is, yeah, nation building is self-determination in practice. But that wasn't the first thing that came out of my students' mouths when I asked them, what is nation building? Very few of them referred to it specifically. It was kind of more of like, yeah, it's there, it's important, but it's more about unity or all these other ideas I previously presented. But it was there. And then this one was really beautiful. And this quote is from that same student who said she wasn't going to vote in Student Senate because Student Senate didn't practice nation building. But she said, nation building gave me an understanding that I am one with the land and people, and that what I take, I need to give back. I felt or realized my spirit was sick. And, and I think that does, take nation building to that deepest level in your heart, to your spiritual well-being. And she tied that to that feeling of being with the land. And, as funny as it is, as sad as it is to think about, SIPI and the buildings. And I remember when I was there were stories about, sometimes a random snake will go through the building, or I felt like there was a brown recluse haunting my area. my cubicle for a while. But still, you know, it's right there in the bosque, and you know, you're just steps away from, you know, the most beautiful land, you know, the Pueblo land we are on. And I do acknowledge that too, and I'm thankful for that. So, you know, our environment is there, you know, no matter where we're at, we are on Indigenous land. And I felt like she really took that to heart. So moving on into decolonization, I asked them, you know, what is decolonization to you? And they came up with, you know, several ideas, and I grouped them into 2 different areas. The first area is the community-based area of decolonization, which really includes things like knowing your identity, knowing, you know, about governance, healing, getting involved, family, and then they mentioned, you know, not using alcohol. And then there's this Native American Studies based idea of decolonization. So it's taking Native Studies classes, it's knowing the history of federal Indian policy, education, accepting and using the past to grow, it's self-sufficiency and independency. So a lot of the ideas, you know, that we've shared today and that you all just shared moments ago. So I'm not even going to try to read this, but I will point you towards like these bolded pieces. So self-sufficiency, breaking away from the ways of the white world, accepting the past and using that to grow. So in one time in a quiz I gave on decolonization, one of my students wrote, yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, but I think it could lead to domestic terrorism. So, you know, so there's that. But, you know, in reality, I know that's not what any of us are trying to teach. We really are trying to teach this idea of, let's get down to the Mario piece. Mario said we have to step back to move forward, apply tradition to everyday life, made me think I can't forget who I am. So, you know, what Mario shared with the students, it really grounded them in this idea that of education as ceremony. So moving on to, okay, so what? So we're learning all these concepts. What are we going to do with it in our careers? A lot of these ideas stem back to health and wellness, you know, especially with the student who mentioned that her spirit was sick, or, you know, students that wanted to address alcohol and drug abuse. And I think that speaks back to the importance of Tennille's presentation, looking at health and access to health and wellness, and to the theme of today's presentations, you know, women's perspective. And I really, it's really made me think about, you know, what we do as women, as mothers, and, you know, we